Welcome to the Finding Financial Freedom podcast with the Frugal Physician, where Dr. Disha Spath will be your companion on this exciting financial adventure. Get ready to conquer debt, build wealth, and embrace a mindful spending lifestyle that will empower you to live life on your own terms.
Welcome back to another episode of Finding Financial Freedom with the Frugal Physician. I'm your host, Dr. Disha Spath, and today we have a really cool guest joining us. She's a full-time adventurer, part-time writer, speaker, and lifestyle design coach. As the co-founder of the award-winning platform, the Fioneers, she's dedicated to helping people use their financial freedom to design a life they truly love. You might have seen her featured in MarketWatch, Business Insider, Forbes, The Motley Fool, and Simple Money magazine. Please join me in welcoming Jessica to the show. Hi, Jessica. How are you doing?
I'm awesome. Thanks so much for having me today.
It's fantastic to talk to you today. In fact, I saw you up on stage at the Plutus Awards back in 2019. We were nominated for the same category. I think it was Best New Blog, and you won that category. I was so happy for you. Totally thought you deserved it because you've been doing amazing things. So this is the first time we've gotten to really connect in person since then. And it's fantastic to see where you came from and where you have gotten now. Just so our listeners can benefit from your experience, Jessica, can you share a bit about your personal journey and what led you to found the Fioneers?
If I go back a little bit, so I graduated from college into the recession in 2009, which was a really difficult time to find a job, to make ends meet. I did street canvassing in New York City for a year,
Oh,
literally one
wow.
of those people that stands on the sidewalk and is like, I'm raising money for this charity. Because there were no jobs. And then I got a job with AmeriCorps making $11,000 a year.
Thank you for your service.
Yes, and so AmeriCorps is like the domestic version of the Peace Corps,
Yeah.
and they, like, specifically want you to feel like you're living in poverty. They pay you 105% of the poverty level for your county. And, so for me, that really started me down a path of having a scarcity mindset, right? So having this true feelings of scarcity, coming into my like life and adulthood of barely being able to make ends meet, like, living in a cockroach infested apartment for a year and not ever eating out, right? Or going anywhere or doing anything really ever because we just didn't have the financial stability to be able to do that. That put me in a mindset to say, okay, I need to get on this traditional career path. I need to work toward the promotions, the salary increases, because I never, ever, ever want to be back in that same place that I was in 2009. And I think that for me lasted for a good 10 to 12 years, right, of my career of continuously taking on more work, right, pushing myself to get the next promotion, always negotiating, and it was exhausting, I will say. I imagine that people when doctors who are in their residency and, working to get into the hospitals or the roles that they want to be in, that that's also an exhausting process.
I mean, a lot of our pathway is prescribed. Someone
Mhm.
tells us where we
Yeah.
get into for med school and then where to go for residency, then where to go for fellowship.
Mhm.
It's very much like the military. The computer runs an algorithm and then you go where they tell you to. But then when
Mhm.
you get onto the real world, that's when physicians often face this. You don't realize you can negotiate your first contract most of the time. But then after that, it's
Mhm.
constant negotiating,
Yeah.
constant working with competing interests of your employer wanting to make money and you as a physician wanting to take care of patients and preserve your quality of life at the same time and, have a family that you actually show up for once in a while.
Right, like, many of these sound similar, right? And so a lot of stress, burnout,
Yes.
and then at the same time and I imagine that female physicians can identify with this too, is that, like, I assumed that what it meant to be a feminist was that I was going to climb the corporate ladder and bring other women up after me. Put a lot of pressure on myself as a woman to be successful, right? To do those things. And, during all of this, my husband is interested in personal finances and interested in financial independence. And, it's like, let's just save a little bit more every year. And I'm like, but why? I don't understand why we need to do that. But then eventually I get to this point where I am completely burned out, right? And I am unhappy in the role that I'm in. I'm taking a look around and I'm saying, like, is this like, I have worked so hard to get myself into this position, right, that I'm in, and what do I have to show for it, right? I have stress, I have anxiety, I have depression, I have migraines, all of these things that are happening because of that. And so at that point, that's when I was ready to learn about financial independence, right? I needed to get to that point to say,
Yeah.
okay, how could they look different? And how are people living their lives differently? And so I heard about FIRE and I thought that it was very interesting. And I dove into a lot of resources and I read Your Money or Your Life. I listened to a whole lot of Choose Five podcasts, but I just wasn't, I like wasn't totally into it. Like I read all of those things and it was like, this feels like a life of deprivation to me. Like it was like people were grinding it out with their careers so that they could retire in, like, 10 years, and they were riding their bikes everywhere, and they were eating beans and rice and ramen, and, like, never spending any money, and I was like, "That doesn't sound good to me, and I don't wanna do that for another 10 years, like, just so I can have all of this freedom later." That's sort of where I started, but then I started hearing and it was, like, around 2018 that was, like, a bunch of people in the early, like, FIRE movement were actually retiring early, and they started, like, going on all of these podcasts and writing blog posts about how they wish they had taken a different path, and
Hmm.
how that they wish that they had taken a slower, happier path where they went part-time earlier, or they focus a lot more on building the life that they wanted along the path, and I was like, "That's what I want." Right?
Yeah.
I wanna be able to build the life that I want as I'm building toward financial freedom, and that financial freedom can help me do that. The summer of 2018 that my husband and I sat down, we were on a vacation in Maine in this, like, cabin off the grid, and we were talking about this, and it was like, "I wanna do this, but I wanna do this in a way that, like, the journey needs to be as remarkable as the destination." Like, we need to focus on making our lives awesome all along the path. And that's really, like, the moment that, like, the idea of the Fioneers was born because it was like, we're focusing on the journey, and one interesting thing too is so we made that decision, right? We said, "Okay, we're gonna do this." We, like, didn't have service and we were, like, in town or something. We, like, bought the domain, which is really funny. After the trip, we came home and, like, less than a week later I started experiencing, like, really severe anxiety and panic attacks, just could not go back to work. It's interesting because I think when we had originally said, "Okay, we wanna do this spy thing, but we want the journey to be as remarkable as the destination," like, I think we were originally thinking, like, "Oh, we're gonna make some small shifts and, like, make sure our life is good," and then all of a sudden it was like, "Whoa, what are we doing?" That sort of conviction was really tested. That led to what we're doing today.
Yeah. So it's funny how the fire movement has evolved. And, there was such a gusto and fervor for the minimalist lifestyle. And I have to say, I was, swept up in it too. And, we made big family moves based on the idea that we would start saving more. But you're right. I mean, at some point, there was a shift in the narrative, and people that were achieving, the stated goal of fire were saying, well, maybe we should have thought about this differently, maybe taking things a little slower. Can you clarify for the audience how, slow fi, which is what you're practicing, is different than the traditional retirement path that would be recommended, which is, go slow, save a little bit of your income, and enjoy the rest.
I would say that Traditional retirement often relies, I think, more on this idea of you're going to spend a lot of money and it's going to be high consumption, if that makes sense. The focus is on earning money so that you can have the nice house and have the nice car and focus on living a more luxurious lifestyle and
Mm.
then be able to retire someday.
Yeah.
And I would say Slow-fi is different from that because the focus is more on how can you use the financial freedom that you're building to design the life that you want? It's less about consumption and luxury, and it's more about how you get to spend your time, what your career structure is, right? That
Yeah.
allows you to be able to live your life a little bit differently. So, for example, I think of sort of the traditional path we talked about as like, I'm going to focus on the nice house, the nice car, that's gonna lock me into needing to work full time for a long time, and I'm gonna focus on, spending and
Yeah.
on these luxuries.
Yeah.
Whereas I think Slow-fi does take a more balanced approach. You can still spend money on things, but I would say I'm still fairly minimalist, and I don't spend money on the things that I don't really value all that much, but the reason for it is so that I don't have to work full time and
Yeah.
I can work for myself and that I can spend my time doing the things that I really want to be doing. So, for example, I'm actually in my camper van right now. Because of Slow-fi, I was able to scale back and I worked part time for a few
Mhm.
years while I built a business that allowed me to become location independent and then allowed my husband to quit his traditional job, and now he's working in the business with me, and we can travel in our camper van for 4 months, right? And that's one way to sort of leverage the wealth that you're building rather than by buying the nicer house and car and, all of those things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, so what I'm hearing is that Slow-fi is a move away from the consumerist mindset that a lot of our generation grew up with. And I think this was really quite a necessary social cultural move that had to happen in the FIRE community and the essentialism and the minimalism, because today the Daily New York Times did a podcast on the 401k and how it's really ruined retirement for a whole generation of people. Now we have a silver tsunami of retirees reaching retirement age with almost no retirement savings. And it's because the pension went away and the 401k was introduced in the 1970s. And people simply did not learn how to, or prioritize, or whatever it was, or didn't have enough income to save for retirement adequately. And we grew up in the pre 2008 recession where I feel like I was given the message from a lot of adults around me that, debt is just a fact of life. Debt is how you make life happen. We finance out cars and furniture and school and whatever, finance it all out. It'll all take care of itself. That people are going to take care of me pension mindset extended into this harsh reality of not having a pension, having to save, but still being in that mindset of people are going to take care of me, everything's going to work out fine. And now is when the actualization of those decisions is actually happening, where, those people don't have enough money to retire. We are really facing a crisis in that situation now. And people from our generation that saw the recession, then saw COVID happen, then saw the tech bubble, that we have seen the economy really not take care of us, the world happenings not take care of us, and we realize that we need to be the ones taking care of us and start making, the wise financial decisions. And I think moving away from consumerism and
Mhm.
valuing our time, valuing our freedom, and being really mindful about that is what you're saying. So
Mhm.
lo-fi is and how it
Yeah.
differs from that traditional retirement path.
And I would say it's in some ways, right, it's not focused. It's focused both on future you and present you. For many of us, depending on how much income we make, right, we need not be as consumerists so
Mhm.
that we are able to plan ahead for our future selves so that we can take care of ourselves and live the lives that we want along the journey as well. And so I would say slow-fi is that combination of saying, okay, I do want to take care of my future self, but I'm not going to grind it out and be miserable to retire early. I am going to leverage money that I'm building along the way so that I can also build the life that I want.
Define for our audience, there's so many different types of FI, right? And different movements. Can you define for us traditional FI versus coast FI? I feel like people talk about coast
Mhm.
FI as well. Can you define those things for us?
Let's say traditional fire or financial independence, retire early, focuses on getting to the point where you never need to make another dollar and you can spend your time however you want. That point is when you get to approximately 25 times your annual expenses. That's just a quick rule of thumb. Once
Mhm.
you get to that point, right, you can withdraw 4% of your portfolio every year and never need to earn another dollar in your life.
Not in savings, but in
In
actual
investments that are
investments.
going to be growing. Yes,
Yes.
exactly. I really like coast financial independence, and traditional financial independence is when work becomes optional. Coast financial independence is the place where saving and investing additional money becomes optional. That's the point where you've already saved and invested enough for your traditional retirement. So, based on your age, that money will continue to grow in the background to provide you with a comfortable traditional retirement at, say, 60. And so, once you get to that point, all you need to do is just cover your actual expenses, which that if your expenses aren't super high, if you live in a, modest right size home, don't finance your cars, right? Spend money on the things that you really value, but don't on the things that you don't. That can give you so much freedom because you don't need to focus on saving or investing anymore. And that's the approach that my husband and I are currently taking. We got to the point where for a while we did have like a 50% savings rate. We were living off one person's paycheck and saving the other. We got to that point, and if people are young, like if people are in their 30s, that number to reach Coast Fi is surprisingly small.
Yeah.
Right? I think for someone who would need, I don't know, 1.8 million to retire. So imagine, someone who spends the national average, which is around 70,000. That person would need around 1.8 million to retire. If they're in their 30s, people will need to do the calculation and I can share a calculator with you, but that's somewhere between 200 and 300,000 saved and
Yeah.
invested. That
Yeah.
will grow, right, to 1.8 million, and that's a much smaller number than needing to fully save and invest that 1.8 million. And so if you can get to that number, at that point, you can start to coast, right?
Yeah.
You can only cover your actual expenses, which then can give you a ton of flexibility to be able to scale back or to take a season off of work each year or to start your own business that you're doing something that you're really passionate and excited about. So one thing that I would say is I feel like I don't know that you're taking a coast fi approach, but I would say you're taking a slow fi approach definitely. And I think of slow fi as like this overarching philosophy where sort of based in the slow movement, like slow food, slow travel, the focus is on intentionality, right? And the
Mhm.
focus is on saying, okay, how can I align my money and my time with what matters most to me? Right. And for you, right, I've seen you've scaled back your work as a physician so
Yeah.
that you can focus on all of these other things that you're interested in.
I know, and there's always competing priorities, right? There's always people pulling at you to come in for longer and longer. People need help and we need doctors. So I feel like we're currently in the coast fi mindset and slow fi too. I mean, they're similar. I think mathematically we're probably at coast fi, but at the same time, I do feel the pull to provide more time as a physician and I do want to. But it's all about balance, and it's all about like how much can I physically possibly do. But let's veer away from me though, because I want to talk about the numbers you just mentioned and how important these
Mhm.
are. And I think the reason for defining these terms is that the utility of the FIRE movement was it brought the idea of compounding interest to the forefront of our generation's mind and really taught the idea of investments and compounding interest and how important that is to financial stability to a whole generation of people that may not have had it taught to them by their parents. This was the kind of knowledge that was passed down in wealthy families from generation to generation because they understood compound interest and how investments work. But for people like you and I that come from blue collar or, kind of poverty line situations, this is not information that was taught to us, right? So we had to go seek it out. And then I think the utility of knowing that a lazy three fund portfolio of index funds can bring X amount of interest to you average going forward in a pretty safe fashion, then you can count on that, at least theoretically count on it, to give you a safe withdrawal rate in retirement. Knowing those numbers, knowing what a FI number is, how much do I need to save for retirement? Then how can I get there quicker? How can I get there in a reasonable fashion? When do I know when I'm at Coast Fi where I have enough to retire comfortably and now I can just start living and, focusing on being intentional? What are those numbers and how do we get there? I think is the biggest message of the FIRE movement that's going to stay with our generation, right? And so you defined FIRE number as the 25 times our annual expenses. Coast Fi, then, as you defined, is when you get to the point where your investments will eventually get you to 25 times your annual investments at the age of 65. And I guess if you want to retire early, then you can increase that number. So now you've taken your work at the Fioneers from a blog to a coaching business. Can you tell us an example of how this thinking and how all of this knowledge has helped someone that you've worked with?
Oftentimes, when I'm working with people, they are getting to a point where they're saying, I've been saving all of this money, right? Saving and investing, but like for what? So
Mhm.
getting to a similar place where I was 5 years ago, where I was looking around at my life and saying, like, what am I doing all of this for? What's the point? Like, it's not making my life better. I'm not happy. People start to realize, like, okay, this isn't necessarily the life that I want. I don't need to follow the traditional script, but I don't yet necessarily know what I want instead or how to get there. That's what I'm helping people do is figure out, okay, what do you really want? Dream big about what those options are and then start to make those things a reality. I can tell you about 2 specific people who I've worked with. So one, his name's Kamran and was a software developer for a Fortune 500 company when I started working for him, and he was like, it's just not doing it for him. His wife worked in education, his kids were in school, he wanted to have summers off because his wife got summers off, and that was super cool, right? And so that was sort of goal number 1, and then it was like, how can I have summers off every year? And so that was part of the dream for him. Year 1, he negotiated a summer sabbatical from his job to, be able to do that. And then from there, used, some of that free time, though he did most of it as a sabbatical and hanging out with his family and traveling, to work on starting his own business. And so he became self-employed, an entrepreneur working for himself and has taken a few different approaches over the years, did some consulting and contracting, and now is focusing on mainly doing like contact course creation, which he can, generate the income that he needs working like 10 to 15 hours a week. And then he can spend time with his family. He can take a lot of the summers off, right? Or take it a lot slower in the summer. And he also then can focus on his own app that he's building that he, is figuring out how to monetize and put out there and could potentially be his sort of main gig over time, as well as traveling with his family, being available when kids are out of school on the many, many days that, kids are sick or have holidays from school or teacher trainings and that kind of thing. Like, he gets to be available for his
Cool.
kids. He gets to invest in his DIY and, like, interior design and building, and so he's actually building, like, a structure in his backyard that's gonna serve as, like, a home office. So he has just, like, time to focus on that too. So it's been really cool to see just, like, how someone can go from being full-time, 45-hour a week software engineer for a company to this taking a sabbatical, running your own business. And then another client, Laura, who her story is a little bit different. So she was an executive and came to me sort of asking the question, like, do I need to leave this job that I love to get my life back? Because she was so burned out and just so stressed and felt like she, just was going through the motions and didn't have time to do the things that she cared most about. Some of that was spending time with her family and her 6-year-old son. So she sort of worked through this lifestyle design process of like, what does the life that I want really look like? What does work that I love look like? And work
Mm.
that works for me? Like, what would that actually look like? So she figured out like, okay, here's the sort of boundaries that would need to be set. Here's the staff that would need to be hired to support the work. She also was like, hey, I would love to be able to travel internationally with my son. And like, she had all of these ideas. Just a few weeks after I wrapped up working with her, the CEO of her company retired. She got offered the job. She negotiated for like all of the things that she wanted, including having a 6-week period of time every year where she could work internationally and work like 15 to 20 hours just to keep the trains running so that she could travel internationally with her son. And she's done that a couple of times. So she went for about a month with her son and did woofing, so like the worldwide opportunities on organic farms with, like, a French-speaking family, and that's, like, really, really cool. So even, to be able to see people being able to design their life in the context of a traditional work environment as well, really cool.
The power of just sitting down and asking yourself, what is it exactly that's important to me? And how can I make it happen? It's
Yeah.
so huge. And having someone working with you, guiding you through that process, that's what coaching is about. And I think there's some real value in it. You can find a coach that can help you get there. Jessica, I want to give our audience the opportunity to connect with you. Where can they find you if they want to connect with you?
They can find me and about all the information about our programs on our website, which is thefioneers.com. Also, we have a YouTube channel, so it's YouTube. We're at Fioneers on YouTube. And then on Instagram, you can find us at the Fioneers. And then one other cool resource that I would love to share is I currently released free limiting beliefs email course. So when people start to make shifts to live their life a little bit differently, limiting beliefs come up, right? And fears because we're stepping a little bit outside of our comfort zone. That free email course over 6 days will walk people through what are limiting beliefs? How do I identify the limiting beliefs that are holding me back? And then strategies to work through them. That is thefioneers.com/email course.
Awesome. Well, I love that it's free, and it sounds like
Mhm.
it also provides awesome value. So now let's do something fun. I've got a fun segment for you where I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and I just want you to respond with the best answer from the top of your head. Okay? You ready? Let's do it. Would you rather have an unlimited travel budget but no home base, or a cozy home base but a limited travel budget?
This is a really hard one, but I think after traveling significantly in our camper van, I would say I want a cozy home base with a limited travel budget.
What? That's really surprising because you're doing the
But
opposite.
I guess it depends on what the limited travel budget is. We are currently traveling on a limited travel budget, and we have a cozy home base, and I really appreciate that. I don't think I'd wanna be fully nomadic.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
good enough. Would you rather perfect your sourdough pizza recipe or discover a new favorite board game every month?
I think I would rather perfect my sourdough pizza recipe. I've been perfecting the recipe over a few years now. We actually travel in our van with our portable pizza oven.
No
So
way.
we make pizza on the road. And yeah, I just think that's so fun. And I think like making homemade pizza for people is like one of my favorite activities to do because it's like one of those slow, fully present times with people.
I'm
Yeah.
so in this conversation right now because we're just buying a pizza oven for our patio that we're building. So, yes, I'm so looking forward
Mhm.
to making, wood fire pizza. I am very jealous of your sourdough starter, and I might have you swing by here and share some with me. It sounds delicious.
Mhm.
Next one. Would you rather write a best-selling book or host a world-famous podcast?
This is a really hard one. I think book. So I am actually in the process of writing a book, and I feel like podcasting is a lot of work.
It depends on systems, right? Everything depends on systems. I like the format of books because it takes the essentials and puts it all in one place. If you're looking for all
Mhm.
the information, you can buy the
Yeah.
book at a reasonable price. It's not going to be thousands of dollars. You get it all
Mhm.
at once, put out in front of you. I think podcasts are different because we're having a conversation. We're not breaking down every single
Mhm.
minute detail of the fire movement, but we're talking about the newest developments, and so it's a
Mhm.
little bit different than
Yeah.
reading maybe an outdated book, right? So,
Mhm.
yeah,
That's true.
I agree with you. I would probably go for the book myself if I could write a best-selling book that really helped change people's lives, because it's at an affordable price point and kinda gives them everything they need. Well, I am so excited that you are here today. Are there any last words of wisdom you'd like to leave with us before we let you jet off in your camper van to the next fabulous location you're going to?
I mean, I guess the last thing that I would say is just that it's incredibly important to find a good balance between taking care of your future self and designing the life that you want today. And that one of them can't take precedence over the other, right? We have to do both to be able to live the life that we want and take care of our future selves.
Absolutely. 100% agree with that. Before you go, will you tell us where you are and what the rest of the day looks like for you?
So we're actually in Lake Tahoe in Central California. It's incredibly beautiful. We actually aren't quite sure what we're doing today. We have a list of potential options of stuff that we might do. So I do think we need to like go to a laundromat and do some laundry. So van life isn't like all glamour, but some things on our list are to like go play a super cool disc golf course or, go for a hike. After I get off this, we'll figure out what we wanna do for the rest of the day.
Well, having a day with no plans sounds heavenly to me. So enjoy. Hope it's beautiful out there for the rest of your time there. And thank you so much for being here with us and sharing your wisdom.
Thanks for having me.
Listeners, be sure to check out Jessica's work at the Fioneers and follow her on social media. As always, if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to share this episode with anyone who might benefit from a little financial inspiration. Until next time, I'm Dr. Disha Spath, wishing you financial freedom and a life you love. Before we sign off, I'd love to hear from you. What was your favorite takeaway from today's episode? Drop a comment on our social media or send us an email at editor@thefrugalphysician.com. And if you're looking for more tips on achieving financial freedom, visit our website and join our newsletter. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Stay frugal, y'all.
The content shared on this podcast should not be taken as individualized financial advice. We are here to share our knowledge and experiences, but it is crucial to consult with professionals such as accountants, financial advisors, or attorneys who can provide personalized guidance based on your specific needs.